Hi, I'm Jillian and welcome to the show. I offer spiritual growth for the rebel soul, guiding you through the labyrinth of your own ascension path. This show is for the rebel souls that challenge the status quo, those that crave authenticity in every single aspect of their lives, that desire to embrace their uniqueness, follow their passions, connect to their soul and live according to who they truly are, even if that means having the courage to go against the grain or the norms of society. If that's you, my spiritual soul seeker, rebel warrior, then this is the place for you. On this podcast, we speak about everything from spirituality, sexuality, conscious relationships, business, and literally everything in between. So if that's your jam, then stay tuned. And go on, be a rebel and subscribe. You know you want to. Welcome back, my beautiful souls. So today's topic is potentially gonna hit close to the bone for many of us walking the spiritual path, and there might be other of you that just have no connection to this whatever, but we're actually talking about addiction. Yes, that is right, addiction. And why so many empaths, intuitives, lightworkers, old souls, and starseeds actually fall into it. You know, and it's a topic that most people actually don't talk about in spiritual spaces. So if you've ever found yourself numbing out, reaching for something to take the edge off, if you've ever found yourself struggling with, a pattern that isn't serving you but just feels impossible to break, then you are not broken. You are definitely not weak, and you are not failing. You're just feeling too much in a world that hasn't actually taught you what to do with that. So, here's the thing, right? Us empaths, us intuitives, us sensitives, we're wired differently, right? Like we feel frigging everything, not just our own emotions, but other people's. That we feel the collectives, we feel the unseen. We walk into a room and we know who's sad. We pick up on other people's grief like static in our field. And if we haven't learned how to clear that energy, what do? We absorb it, right? We weren't taught boundaries. We weren't taught energetic hygiene. We were taught to toughen up or get over it or stop being so sensitive. So what did we do? We had to adapt, right? And addiction can sometimes become like an unconscious way to protect ourselves from drowning in a constant flood of that sensation. Alcohol, food, drugs, sugar, sex, scrolling, work, whatever your flavor is, it's not random. It's actually relief. And that's how it starts for many of us. Not with a big trauma or a dramatic fall, but with a quiet, constant overwhelm that no one else sees, And we don't get addicted to the substance. We actually get addicted to the silence that it brings. That numbing out of the noise. So, most of you might not know this, but for years, I was a full-blown workaholic. Years ago, before I had kind of words for what I do now, before I fully embraced my psychic healer channel, I was completely disconnected from myself. I was functioning, I was working, I was smiling, but inside I was empty. I was numb, got exhausted, and I was just clinging to patterns that I knew weren't healthy. I thought grind was my proof of my worth, and the more I did, the more valuable I felt. The busier I was, the less space there was for this overwhelm inside. But, work addiction does not heal the overwhelm. It actually feeds it. Even today, I still find myself pulled into overwork when I'm, maybe avoiding my feelings or an uncomfortable energy. And it's a pattern that I fully recognize. And, I redirect and I do what I need to do when I need to do it, right? Because again, addiction isn't just a one and done thing. It is a journey. And over my life, I have had addictive behaviors to different things over my life, right? Like alcohol, I've taken drugs, I had a porn addiction, which it was just quite vulnerable out there, but I want to be real and just let everyone know that these things occur and why they occur, right? And I have clients that have gone through exactly the same thing, and because no one's talking about it, I'm going to talk about it because there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? And there's reasons that those of us that are so highly sensitive do fall into these addictive patterns, and I see it so often, And again, the the starseeds, the old souls, we can also feel like this ache of disconnection, which can so lead to addiction too, right? Like a lot of starseeds, a lot of old souls, a lot of light workers, right, feel like we don't belong here, right? We kind of come to this earth and almost like carry this homesickness that we just can't explain. You know, have you ever been a kid and you've just had this like millisecond feeling that's just, you know, or you look up into the sky or the stars and you're just like, you just have this feeling like, you know, there's something bigger than what this just is, like what your present moment just is? Because I know I had that, right? And we look around at a world as we get older, obsessed with productivity and ego and performance, you know, which is I fell into that too, right? I completely fell into that matrix training of, you know, having to do more. But then we look around at some point, and probably again when we're younger, and then we might numb that out, that knowing, and then when we start to awaken again, and we're kind of like, hold on a minute, was this a mistake? Did I land in the wrong planet? Like, why the hell am I here? You know, this place feels so harsh, so loud, so disconnected. And, you know, that ache, that void, that's not just an existential crisis that you're having. It's actually a soul disconnection. You know, and when you don't feel connected to something bigger, you'll just do anything to fill that emptiness. And, you know, addiction, this is where addiction comes in, right? It becomes a stand-in for the divine. You know, drugs, alcohol, food, compulsive behaviors, whatever it is, becomes a substitute for the soul connection that you're craving. That's what you're craving, something bigger than yourself that you've already felt, probably again when you were younger, but you just now don't know how to source that from within. You know, because addiction is not always about escaping. It's actually often, for a lot of us, it's about trying to feel whole again. Okay? Now, let's talk trauma. You know, many of the sensitives, the intuitives out there are what I would class as trauma survivors, right? Whether from this life, from past lives, inherited down from your lineage. And because our nervous systems are so highly tuned in, we don't just remember the trauma, we literally relive it, like in vivid technicolors. Like trauma hits us differently. It hits us in 4K. You know, and if there's no tools for healing, no space, you know, to speak the truth, then that pain can feel really unbearable. And, you know, then we reach for the things that bring us momentarily relief, right? Like that addiction offers like an off switch for a time, right? But having sensitivity without support will turn into suffering, right? And then having suffering without the tools will lead to coping. And then coping over time, that's when it becomes compulsion. And again, I had that when I just spoke about my porn addiction. That was that, right? I've done so much past life and ancestral and inner child stuff around trauma for my own healing path, that's what actually fueled my part of my porn addiction from a very young age. And it's like, you know, and again, I want to talk about this because porn addiction is something that like it's mostly males that speak upon, right? But it really is not. It's like it is something that women also experience too, right? Addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter what your fruit or your flavor is, right? It is addiction, you know. And I've gone down scroll holes, and I've probably tapped into a few of them, right, over my time. And probably at the time, I wouldn't have classed certain things as addictions, right? You know, scrolling or food or whatever, because that's so normalized in our culture and society, but it's not. It's an escape. It's a way to cope. It's a sense of relief. It's a numbing. Or actually, in a way, it can also be a way to feel something. You know, if you've shut down, if you're so sensitive and this is what happened to me anyway, if you've shut down your sensitivity, if you've shut down your emotions because of something like trauma, you might search for something that feels pleasurable, because feeling anything feels better than feeling nothing. So I just want to ask you guys something, right? Like, have you ever also felt like in your life you were too much for the world, you know, or maybe even just not enough for the people around you, You know, like this is a big thing. The loneliness of being too much or not enough. This is one of the core wounds that many healers, empaths, intuitives, sensitives, lightworkers, starseeds, all the above feel, right? And I get it because I did too, right? Most of us grew up feeling maybe, I don't know, a bit weird, like misunderstood, too emotional, too deep, too intense, not emotional enough if you shut them down, which is what I did. You know, or you are like that deep one in a shallow world. You know, the kid that saw too much, the kid that felt too much, the teen that got labeled dramatic, intense, sensitive, weird, like whatever it was. You know, the adult now that just wonders if they're still too much for most people. Or people are going to get you if you're constantly being misunderstood, or you can see shallowness in the world or the people around you, and you're just like, I don't want to bar that. Right? And this is where addiction can slide in. You know, it becomes that comfort for the things that like no one else gave us. That kind of safe space that maybe we never had. That belonging that we longed for, right? And if you've never truly felt met by anyone for who you truly are, then trust me, you're going to reach for anything that dulls that ache. Because that is an ache of loneliness that hurts, right? That really stings. And, you know, I've worked with people with addictions that are on their spiritual journey that have awakened. And, you know, I worked with a woman recently who'd been sober from alcohol for a long time now, but she kind of still felt like she was like, I don't know, white knuckling, in her words, way through life. You know, she'd done the work, therapy, recovery, 12-step, you know, her spiritual intuitive gifts had come online, you know, when she stopped drinking. But then she said something that really struck me. She said, like, I am sober, but I don't feel free, you know? And when we started working together energetically, we actually uncovered layers of past life wounding, ancestral grief, stuff that she'd been carrying down the genetic line from all the women in her family that had never been able to speak up or have a voice, right? She also had an entity attachment from a very traumatic time in her life, right? The alcohol had just numbed the overwhelm of all the things that she was carrying in her system, in her nervous system, in her body, in her energetic field, right? And when we cleared what was actually underneath it, that helped her anchor her actual sensitivity as a gift and not a curse. And this is when she finally felt at peace, right? She didn't need to resist the urge anymore because the reason for the urge was actually gone. And she actually started to use her empathy, her sensitivity, the care that she had been so overwhelmed with because she was so energetically sensitive. She actually turned that into what she now does for work. So beautiful. And this is the power of this work, guys. And this is why I'm so passionate about what I do and helping people on their own path, because I have walked it too, right? I've walked through the flames. I've walked through the fire. I'm not afraid to go into the deep, dark shadows of my own self, and therefore I can hold other people in theirs too, right? So, one more piece, you know, that I want to mention that I feel is so invaluable, because you are going to resonate with this. Most of us, empaths, healers, lightworkers, intuitive, sensitives, are chronic overgivers, right? We pour into others, we hold space, we heal, we feel, but we rarely receive at the level that we give, right? This is something that I hear from my clients all the time. The living in the masculine, the overdoing, the overgiving, and struggling to receive is something that literally every single one of my clients has, and we have to work through, right? And I get it because I had it too, and I'm still working through it, right? But I'm so much better now. You know, like, you get depleted, but you're still pushing through, right? You get exhausted, but you're still saying yes. I literally said to my client today, I was like, no is going to be your most favorite response from now on. And, you know, when we don't actually know how to receive and the depletion just gets so intense, what do, right? We reach for that quick energy, that sugar, the caffeine, the dopamine hit, the whatever it is, the quick numbing gratification, because something's got to fill that gap, right? And that's where addiction comes in. Addiction steps into kind of like a balance, what we never learned to balance in ourselves, right? When you're constantly pouring from an empty cup, addiction fills it. But, of course, temporarily, right? And then, finally, let's talk about collective pain, right? Again, because many of the starseeds and the sensitives are not just carrying your own trauma, right? You're carrying the pain of your ancestors, the collective, and even the planet, right? That's like, this is what you signed up for, right? I know that might sound a harsh reality, but we've signed up for this. And it can be heavy, right? And if your psychic gifts or your intuitive gifts or your healing gifts started to come online before maybe your nervous system is ready, right? It can honestly feel like you're going mad. And that's why a lot of people just numb, like they zone out, they spiral because, they've opened their gifts without the tools to stay grounded and cleared. And, that weight can really feel unbearable. And obviously addictive patterns can emerge as just like a way to cope. Like for this, like the people that are holding the energy of the collective, like their addiction or their addictive behaviors can just be a response to just holding too much that was never actually theirs, like what was never actually yours, right? So I just want to leave you with this, right? Like if you've ever struggled with addiction or compulsive patterns on your spiritual path, then you are not broken, right? You are not weak. You are not failing at this thing called life. Again, you were just never taught how to manage the depth of your being. And again, not everyone is going to understand your journey because you are not like everyone. And you've done your best to survive it. You have. But now it's time to move from surviving to actually thriving. And many sensitives like use addiction not to run away from who they are, but actually to survive a world that just never taught them or supported them in how to be all that they actually are, right? Because let me tell you this, right? Like the gifts that are underneath your sensitivity, they are so real, they are so powerful, and they are so needed in this world right now, right? Like when you finally receive the support, the tools, the healing that you need, what once felt like an unmanageable curse, right, will reveal itself as the sacred gift that it's meant to be. And these are the gifts, these are traits, your sensitivity, the things that are going to start to appear that are so ingrained in your essence. These are gifts that you're meant to use as part of your purpose. You're meant to use them to live a meaningful life, and they are completely part of your soul's plan. So if this episode spoke to you in some way, if you're like, oh my God, I feel seen. And again, whatever that addictive pattern, whatever that addictive behavior, whatever that compulsion is, again, whether it's TV, scrolling, sweets, like, it doesn't have to be full-blown drugs or alcohol or gambling or porn or anything, or sex or anything like that. It could just be, I go down a scroll hole and I'm just like numbing myself out, and that you do this. But if you're an empath, if you're an intuitive, if you're a sensitive, like, let's get to go deeper with this, right? Like these things are coming up for a reason. These coping patterns, these mechanisms are coming up for a reason. And this is what I do. I hold space for sensitives like you to not only reclaim your gifts, but to clear out that energetic debris wherever it is. And to just stop outsourcing your safety, for you to start to trust in yourself, to stop doubting yourself, to believe what you are truly capable of. Because your sensitivity is not the problem, it is honestly your superpower. So whether it's through my one-on-one sessions, my healing workshops, my private coaching, the path, or joining the Rebel Psychic School, like, let's alchemize it together. So I just want to say thank you, my loves, for being here yet again. And I appreciate all of your support. If you've enjoyed this, if you have any questions, drop me a message on Instagram or comment here. Don't forget to subscribe. And, all the ways to work with me are down in the show notes below. So until next time, I just want you to remember this, my beautiful sensitive creatures. Stay grounded, stay open, and stay sensitive. Sending you so much love. Until next time.